For those who are new here this morning, Lynn and I have very recently returned from a 10-week sabbatical, as in last Saturday, very recently. When we loaded up our car and drove out of New York to drive across country for our sabbatical in January, February, and part of March, we weren't alone. Yes, of course, we had each other and Luna, our small shy dog. But we also had 2 amaryllis bulbs that we had been given as holiday gifts from the doll family. They were just beginning to sprout, and we didn't want to miss watching them grow and bloom while we were away. So we nestled their pots carefully into a basket, and they rode behind the passenger seat and the back seat, in and out of every place we stopped for a couple of weeks. We called them the traveling amaryllis, or the traveling amarylli, not to be confused with the Wilburys. Here they are in Virginia. They were taller when we left our dear friends Alice and David in Fairfax, and taller as we got to Savannah, Georgia, and taller still in Florida. We took their picture next to pink flamingos in Baton Rouge, plastic flamingos as they were preparing for Mardi Gras, and towering red rocks in Sedona, Arizona. One was a bit bigger than the other, and every day they got taller. As we crossed the California border via Interstate 40, we needed to go through the checkpoint where they inspect produce and so forth to make sure no one is bringing in any critters that could endanger California's agriculture. We shared that we had oranges from the grocery store, which were fine to bring, but the agent had a few questions about the amaryllises. We were able to assuage their concerns, and they let us through with the growing bulbs. Driving back onto the freeway, we exclaimed how terrible it would have been to have gotten all that way only to lose them at the California border. Of course, we also remarked that it would be terrible to bring a critter in that could do harm to California's, and thus the nation's, food supply. And also named that the result may have been different if we were not white or if we didn't speak English. By the time we arrived in San Jose, the tallest one had a large bud, almost the size of 2 cupped hands, that was getting ready to open. Over the next several days, the single center bud of the tallest one produced 4 individual buds. Which slowly, each at their own pace, eventually bloomed with large, soft white and pink flowers. And when all the flowers were fully open, it was so heavy that the main stalk needed a stake for support, which is provided by our friend and retired colleague, Lynn Gardner in Davis, California. The second amaryllis bloomed with audacious and orangey red blossoms whose petals were shaped differently while visiting with our daughter. Both were so beautiful to bear witness to. Weeks later, as we were preparing to begin the cross-country drive home, the traveling amaryllises, or amarylli, were finishing up too. We gave one to each of Lynn's sisters, who so generously and graciously hosted us during much of our time in California. The symbolism of care and beauty and the hope that the flowers will come back next year, connecting us across the miles, made us quite teary. Still does. After the long drive back home to New York, we were surprised and delighted to find that amaryllis from previous years were now growing, and one was just beginning to bloom in our sunroom. And it was this tall. As we paid attention to the amaryllis each day of our sabbatical, we also practiced noticing the small changes within ourselves. How were we feeling? In what ways are we growing? When and how do we need support? When do we need to be drawing energy in like a bulb or expending energy out into the world like a flower? When do our identities carry privilege, and when do they result in us being treated differently? After mentioning the amaryllis in last week's service, we have heard from some of you how much you appreciate them too. While amaryllis make for pretty good teachers and traveling companions, perhaps one of the more pointed lessons is for us as a reminder that may be helpful to you as well to intentionally pause once in a while and notice the beauty of growing things. Not just the bodacious flowers, but also the buds now appearing on so many trees whose leaves will eventually unfurl in so many shades of green and other beautiful colors. The growing of grass, the returning of the green to that grass, listening for the bird songs, pausing from our busyness to pay attention to beauty. It can be so hard with all the expectations on our lives. And we notice that as we return to work and continue to pay attention to the microgreens that we now have growing, bless you, and other plants that we're tending to, that it just allows for a breath, a grounding, a moment to recenter. It just takes a couple seconds some days.
As a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. To be able to do this, to accept and encourage one another, we need to pay attention. Yesterday was the fabulous Joy of Us extravaganza. And it was clear that those who had worked for months planning and preparing had paid attention and were creating spaces, activities, and food for all those who would attend. A baked potato bar is like worship and congregational life in Unitarian Universalism.
Tell us how.
How is that, you ask? Well, it is the goal that everyone finds something delicious and nourishing. So, thanks to all those who brought toppings, there were lots of options at the potato bar. In fact, there was so much variety, you didn't even need to have a potato. There were choices for those of us who are vegetarian, vegan, or omnivores. There were spicy toppings and those that were more mild. And it was a great opportunity to appreciate that each of us enjoy and are nourished by different things. And that some among us need certain options in order to feel well, to breathe safely. And we're guessing that no one was offended that there were gluten-free choices marked. The folks who liked mild salsa went right on past the hot sauce without any concern. They knew it was there for someone else. Likewise, in our worship services and throughout our programs and ministries, we strive to have something meaningful and nourishing for everyone. Does that mean that every song, reading, ritual, or word will resonate with you? Definitely not. Religious community is countercultural to capitalism. Yes, it's true. Money's needed to run the place, but here you are not a consumer. We don't contribute because we're consuming something, rather, or trying to squeeze what we can from a dollar. We're all invited to be contributors, real stewards of this institution's well-being, giving what you can and maybe even stretching a bit to support the ministries here and in the community, paying forward what you have been blessed to receive from those who have gone before. It's our turn to help make the future UUs experience this joy on their earthly journey too. So like the potato bar or other potluck, it can be an opportunity to notice who is appreciating what is being offered. Notice who really needs it. Who really needed that quiet and prayer today? Who really needed time singing in community? Notice those things and then find what are the delicious and nourishing things that are here for you. There is no need to be offended by what has been prepared with someone else in mind. Accepting and encouraging one another happens most easily when we're connected and when we're communicating with one another. A congregation is not static, as was noted this past week during the board's open question conversation. A congregation is always changing. Every week, it's a little bit different. And so what we do together changes too. Whenever you began attending here, in person or online, whether that was 90 years ago or today, this congregation is different because you're participating. Together, we practice keeping our hearts open so that there's space for someone else and for new ideas to arrive.
If the sky was clear for you where you were this week, you may have seen the aligning of the planets in the western sky. And while it wasn't a surprise, it was still powerful and beautiful to experience. Similarly, over this next month or so, and going back a little time, there is a confluence of holidays and holy days aligning in ways that are worthy of our attention too. Recently, we experienced the first day of spring. It is currently the month of Ramadan. Today is Palm Sunday, and this coming week includes Passover and Easter, and soon the Buddhist tradition of Vesak and the Hindu Ugadi celebrations. Like the traveling amaryllises, each of these is a beautiful expression of the particular tradition from which it emerged. Each of these holidays and holy days include important traditions and rituals, some of which are personal and private, while others are communal and even open to the public. As Unitarian Universalists in 2023, the goal isn't to celebrate everything or to try and make a tradition palatable to everyone, but rather to practice authentically and respectfully the rituals that have meaning for us, and to learn from the meaning that others find as well. It can be very humbling and beautiful to take part in or witness rituals and traditions that are not one's own. Even rites of passage that may be familiar, such as a wedding or a memorial service, are celebrated differently depending on the cultures and practices of those involved. Heck, go to a different UU church and it will be different than the one that you are sitting in right now, because we are different. Attending such rituals offers an opportunity to gain new understanding and to support people in our lives. Maybe you attended an equinox or an Ostara celebration, even if you don't have an earth-centered practice. Maybe you've been invited to join in the breaking of the day-long fast iftar during Ramadan, even if you are not Muslim. Maybe you will have an opportunity to take part in a Passover Seder this week, even if you are not Jewish. Maybe you will attend a sunrise Easter service, even if you are not Christian. Or maybe you are celebrating a holiday that is important to you and have generously invited someone to join you who wouldn't otherwise do so. And what a wonderful thing that is, too. We've experienced many of those opportunities and have always come away moved, even when the theologies are not our own. And that has shifted over time, moving away from stealing or leaning onto other people's traditions, but to lean into them, not trying to change other people's words or thinking those theologies should change, but being a good guest, like being a good host in religious community, is so important.
Yesterday, we had the honor of attending a promotion ceremony for a friend and colleague who serves as a chaplain in the New York Air National Guard. Some of you may remember Reverend Julie Taylor, who led worship here last fall. and spoke of their work at Ground Zero after September 11th, 2001. As of yesterday, Chaplain Taylor is now a major. We don't attend many military ceremonies. Neither of us have served in the military or had family members on active duty. We have known Julie for a while, and they've shared some of their spiritual and personal journey with us. We knew that being present was a way to support and celebrate their growth and this important milestone. It didn't need to be our culture or tradition to know that this promotion had great meaning for them, as well as for the other chaplains who were there, all those that they serve, including a member of this congregation who's an officer in the Air National Guard. It didn't need to be our tradition to feel moved when Julie's two kids attached the major insignia on Julie's uniform. And we could see the joy and pride in their faces as they shared hugs and fist bumps. Having a commitment to accept and encourage one another can mean that we develop more empathy and that we deepen our own sense of truth and meaning along the way. And so when Rabbi Rafi Spitzer invited us to attend a bris, a Jewish ceremony of circumcision for their youngest child last fall, we said yes. The ritual was held in their home with lots of family and friends. We didn't know any of the songs. We didn't know the prayers that were recited in unison in Hebrew. But there was a joyful reverence that was palpable and that did not require translation. Reverence because we were witnesses to an act of covenant that is thousands of years old. And joy because the parents and family were celebrating their faith and welcoming their child surrounded by those who love them. As Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge the importance of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and that as human beings, we do some of that search in community. So while we need to avoid cultural misappropriation as we explore a religious path and be respectful rather than argumentative of others' journeys, there are also times to question. We don't need to tolerate practices of discrimination and harm. We don't need to put ourselves in danger. And there are dangerous groups posing as religions or religious. There have been many throughout time. And there are people right now, right-wing people whose values seem woefully misguided and quite distant from the teachings of Jesus, of Yahweh, of Allah. We're not talking about those. If someone put something poisonous, so to speak, on the potluck table, we would not leave it out to serve. Today, we're talking about the blessings of coming to understand and to know one another's faith that moves one towards spiritual growth. That's the kind of sharing we need.
Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, the current president of Star King School for the Ministry, reminds us that there have always been people of faith like us. We are the people who sought a religion marked by freedom and reason and acceptance, in addition to faith and hope and love. We are called by our faith to respond to the world, its sorrows as well as its joys. She continues, we are often heartbroken about the state of this world, but never truly in despair. We, who are privileged to be part of this liberal faith, have inherited an extraordinary legacy. We have been given the gift of freedom to believe or to doubt, the gift of reason to consider what we know of life and compare it to the timeless wisdom from other cultures. We have received powerful examples of courage in the service of humanity and of a love that encompasses all life. These are treasures, but they are not ours to keep. They enrich each of us, but only if we give them away again and again. In our story this morning, we heard about a farmer who grew something so large that they couldn't harvest it on their own. They asked for help, and people of a variety of identities said yes. They didn't all have to call God the same word. They didn't have to understand the nature of God to be in the same way. They didn't need to all think alike to love alike. They just needed to be willing to be present and to try something together. So too, we Unitarian Universalists are called to make our earthly journey in community with other seekers who are striving to make the world a kinder, more compassionate, more just place. Wondrous our faith settles deep in the earth, rising green to bring a new day, we sing. May this be a community in which we continue to pay attention to the subtle and bold expressions of beauty,
to expand the circles of welcome,
to deepen the bonds of understanding,
to risk curiosity about one another's faith,
and be willing to change our minds and our hearts by what we humans experience on this journey together. May we help to make all of that so.
Salam, Shalom,
Ashe,
Aho, Namaste,
Amen,
and blessed be.